Welcome to Forgotten Women, a podcast that uncovers the stories of pioneers who transformed France but have been forgotten. I'm Hugo, and over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about women and one in particular who changed how we access knowledge itself, even nowadays. Not through grand political speeches, but through her passion for knowledge and accessibility. Today, we are going to delve into the life of a brilliant woman, Suzanne Brillet, and there is a high chance you've never heard of her, ever. Now, let's jump back 100 years ago. During the period of war, Paris remains the cultural capital of the world. In its atmosphere of innovation, some people, such as Brillet, are asking, what about our libraries? What about how we access and organize human knowledge itself? Because here's the thing. In the 30s, French libraries were often exclusive and bureaucratic institutions. You wanted to consult a bibliography? You'd have to ask a librarian to fetch it for you. Want to know what resources existed on your research topic? You'd better have connection or a lot of patience, like Brillet had. The woman who informed me on everything about Suzanne Brillet and answered all of my questions said something in her bulletin with which I fervently agree on and which resonated with me during my research on this woman. According to popular opinion, the lives of librarians and other archivists, both at work and outside of work, are neither passionate or exciting, it's just papers. Even today, many people, including you perhaps, dear listeners, still hold on to this traditional image. But on the contrary, Suzanne Brillet was a hero. She showed us that she, like many other professionals, especially women, was passionate about her work and her mission. She was a woman of great courage and determination who did not shy away from conflict or danger. Her life was marked by a series of struggles and victories, and her work was not without its share of difficulties and setbacks, and you'll soon know why. But on the contrary, and in many different ways, related to documentation or not, she devoted her life to her professional mission, building the library of tomorrow. So what did she actually do? Between 1934 and 1954, she conceived, established, and directed something unprecedented, the Salle des Catalogues et Bibliographies at the Bibliothèque Nationale. But here's the intriguing part I've discovered. France had left her behind. She was erased from history. It took historians from across the Atlantic, and the work of one woman would be the key to our mystery today, decades after her death, to recognize her accomplishment. So today we're investigating how does a revolutionary get forgotten and what can we learn by bringing her back into the light almost a century later. When I started researching for this podcast, I knew I needed help. I couldn't answer to my question alone. To understand why Suzanne Brillet vanished from history, I knew I needed to speak with someone who spent years excavating these forgotten stories. That's when I discovered the work of Sylvie Fayet-Scribe, a historian who had dedicated much of her academic life to excavating these stories. She did not just write about this woman. She became something of a detective herself, such as me when I tried to understand who was Suzanne Brillet by piecing together archives, conducting interviews, and publishing research that finally gave figures like Suzanne Brillet, Louise Noël Malclé, and Fer de la Motte their due recognition. So I normally reached out to her, knowing she had dedicated much of her career to recovering the contribution of these women documentalists in the 30s. When we connected over video call, I asked her the question that had been nagging at me since I started this project. And I'm sure you had the same till now. Why did she leave no trace? How did she vanish without leaving anything of herself? Why nothing of these women are existing in the historical narratives? So hold on tight, because we're off on a great journey with many twists and turns as a Korean drama.
On a fait sa biographie, on a lu tous les livres qui étaient en bibliothèque, et puis moi j'étais à peu près certaine qu'elle avait mis quelque part des archives, parce que je me suis dit c'est pas possible qu'une femme comme ça, qui aime tant les livres, qui aime tant les archives, qui aime tant les traces, ne laisse pas quelque chose.
Here, Sylvie starts off with the same question as we all have and gives us a first glimpse of what may have caused the disappearance of this pioneer who revolutionized France. And with all this in place, one might think that it was all for political reasons. As for with everything in France, as soon as there's measures are put in place to monopolize such important work.
Et vous savez, il y a un vieux problème en France entre la com et la doc.
Ah.
Donc, en fait, c'est purement un problème idéologique. C'est comment la com, en 71e section d'université, peut faire dégringoler la doc, qui est aussi en 71e section. Donc, il y a un maître de com qui a retrouvé des archives, et le ministère, à ce moment-là, il était sous la férule des Allemands. Mais il fallait quand même bien qu'il gagne un petit peu de sous, puisque sa femme, elle pouvait plus bosser, qu'elle avait été virée en tant que juive. Voilà, il y a ce problème à l'époque d'une partie de la doc qui malheureusement n'est pas là parce que soit elle est en camp de concentration, soit elle est ailleurs.
But I think we can go further than that. And Sylvie referred to the status of women when she spoke with her predecessor.
Quand je fais l'histoire dans les années 90, et puis après même 2000-2010, encore plus vers 2010, il y a des gens de la com, en 71e section de l'université française, qui vont essayer de semer des pots de banane sur l'histoire de la doc.
Ah oui.
C'est-à-dire de révéler, alors que je l'avais dit évidemment dans la biographie de Grelier, qu'il avait été bien obligé, comme d'autres, de travailler sous les ordres du ministère de l'Information qui était dirigé par les Allemands.
Her words stayed with me. What do we lose when we forget? We don't lose stories, we lose how we understand the world and when we connected. In fact, for Brie and for most people, especially women, the world of professional librarianship was closed entirely. Women had only recently been permitted to become professional librarians. Suzanne Brie was among the first 3 women admitted into the Bibliothèque nationale in 1924.
Ça permettait aussi d'emmerder, il n'y a pas d'autre mot, Briet à la Bibliothèque nationale.
Ah oui.
C'est-à-dire, de lui faire toujours des remarques, d'en profiter pour dire qu'elle avait un passé avec les Allemands. Et puis, pareil, à Éric de Grelier. Mais bon, Éric de Grelier, c'est vrai qu'il venait quand même de l'anarchisme de gauche. C'était quelqu'un de gauche, quelqu'un d'extrêmement intelligent. Il était marié avec une juive, donc il n'en revenait pas, mais il a bien compris que il était le fruit d'une attaque professionnelle.
This is the world she entered, traditional, male-dominated, resistant to change. And she would spend the next 30 years turning it inside.
Alors c'est vrai que quand j'ai écrit l'article de Briet, sur Briet, et puis l'article sur de Grelier, je me suis pas trop étendue là-dessus, parce que c'est vrai que toute carrière professionnelle, en fait, vous avez des batailles derrière entre les gens, des dominants, des dominés. Donc moi, ça m'est arrivé aussi.
Toutes ces pressions, ça a participé à ce qu'il y ait peu d'informations sur le...
Ah oui.
Ah oui.
Oui. Et ça, c'est le premier blackout, c'est arriver à casser la carrière de 2 personnes qui sont très brillantes.
Ah oui.
Et ceux qui cassent, c'est ceux qui reviennent comme le directeur de la BNF, qui a vraiment tout fait pour les casser, et puis Meria, et puis sans doute d'autres derrière Meria, qui ont tout fait pour les casser.
To return back on Brie, I want to recall how revolutionary this woman was, even though Sylvie, during our interview, tried to be as modest as possible about. Brie took resources that had been locked away in bibliographies, in catalogs, in indexes, in dictionaries, and she did not stop here. If you recall from our discussion that Brie was still working during the interwar period, during the brutal winter of 1940, while Nazi, and she did not stop there. If you recall from our discussion that Brie was still working during the interwar period, during the brutal winter of 1940, while Nazi forces occupied France, she continued to work with her colleague Allan every Saturday to compile a comprehensive file of international catalog rules. This invisible work of standardization, would later be used by IFNESS, France's national standard organization. She was active in founding the French Union of documentation organism. In 1931, she became vice president of the International Federation for Documentation. So why was she forgotten? She seemed like someone knowledgeable and brilliant and who would have helped. So now the question remains, why was she forgotten? She seems someone brilliant and benefic. So the question remains, why was she forgotten? What were the reasons? They are still unanswered, but we can guess. Maybe it can be timing, because when she visited the United States in 51 and 52, the influential librarian J.C. Scherer mischaracterized her theories as materialist rather than functional, missing her point entirely. American professionals did not initially grasp what she was proposing, but it can be partly gender. Fire-script research makes it clear for me that professional women in this era walk a tightrope. Too modest and they'd be overlooked, too bold and they'd be condemned in the shadow realm. And partly because of the scope of documentation and all the pressure that were surrounded this domain. With the constant media pressure, the articles against the documentalists, but also from the Infocom and historian departments throughout decades who did not want to change the narrative, a well-oiled machine.
Quand vous êtes en histoire, je vous le dis tout de suite, les gens mentent. Ils mentent. Ils se réapproprient l'histoire, ils aiment mettre en avant leur image, ils aiment... voilà, ça c'est une constante qu'on trouve toujours. Alors, les femmes, les hommes... Je ne sais pas, quand les femmes, dans quelques années, auront beaucoup de postes à responsabilité, je ne sais pas si elles ne feront pas pareil que les hommes, en fait. C'est plus un problème de dominant-dominé.
Oui.
Vous voyez ? Donc ça, c'est la première chose qui explique, en fait, qu'on n'en ait pas parlé. Et puis la deuxième chose après, qui en rajoute encore, c'est toujours la bataille entre l'infocom et l'infodoc, en 71e. Donc, tout d'un coup, il y a eu un maître de conf qui s'est dit, tiens, si j'en rajoutais une couche contre De Grelier et contre Briet, ça serait pas mal. Ça m'a beaucoup amusé parce que je me suis dit, ça continue. Ça continue,
40 ans après.
mais pas, oui, même 30 ans après, et pas les mêmes gens. C'est-à-dire, c'était la doc contre la doc, pour éliminer certains de la doc après-guerre. Et puis là, c'est la com contre la doc. Comme je savais qu'elle était née dans l'Est de la France, qu'elle y était retournée, que c'est une grande spécialiste de Rimbaud, qu'elle faisait partie des amis de Rimbaud, que là-bas, quand même, il y avait pas mal de bibliothèques, et que, de mon point de vue, à un moment ou à un autre, elle avait bien dû déposer quelque chose dans une bibliothèque. Si vous voulez, à aucun moment, j'ai pu m'imaginer qu'elle avait rien laissé
rien du tout, quoi.
Derrière elle. Et j'ai téléphoné 1 fois, 2 fois, 3 fois, et la 3e fois, j'ai eu la chance de ma vie, c'est-à-dire que l'eau a débordé, est rentrée dans la cave de la bibliothèque municipale, et qu'elles ont été obligées de tout sortir.
Ah oui.
Et en sortant tout, elles ont retrouvé la valise d'archives de Suzanne Briet. Mais Suzanne Briet, qui savait qu'elle avait des ennuis, avait dit à n'ouvrir que, alors je ne sais plus combien d'années après ma mort.
50 ans, je crois, non ?
Oui, 50 ans, voilà, 50 ans. Et donc la bibliothécaire m'a dit, écoutez, c'est très bien tout ça, mais je ne peux pas les ouvrir. Donc j'avais dit à Buckland, faut qu'on attende.
And about that case, what secret does it hold? We don't know yet. Even in death, Suzanne Briet keeps her mystery. In one of her articles, Fire-Script writes something that stopped me cold. It took the work of English-speaking historians for Suzanne Briet's major contribution to information science to be recognized. That's why in our next episode, we'll be talking about her most influential contribution published in 1951, after the research trip to the US, pushing her to publish a 48-page manifesto titled Qu'est-ce que la documentation? What is documentation? And we might find all our answers, who knows? I'm Hugo. This has been Forgotten Woman. Next time we'll meet Professor Buckland, which is, in my humble opinion, one of the most knowledgeable person about these French pioneering women in the US, and who saw the real values that they contributed in history. Thanks for listening. Till then, keep asking questions.